Let's talk about the land beast and the sea beast of Revelation. The sea beast rises from the sea. It's the chaotic, raging crowds, the zealot uprising out of the masses. Think John of Gischala, Simon Ben-Giora, and others who were seizing the altars, the city, and everything. The sea always means turbulent people in scriptures, and that's exactly the wild swell of lawlessness that we see going on during the Jewish war. The land beast comes from the land, which is Judea, the covenant ground, the covenant land. These are the corrupt temple priests and religious leaders who spoke like a dragon, had false authority, were faking signs, forcing loyalty, and controlling who would buy and sell in the chaos.
Hello, guys. David Vos here. Whoa, buddy, it's a beautiful day. I mean, it's more beautiful than it was yesterday. And, I've got some, oh my goodness, roses blooming all over the place. I'm going to take some pictures as soon as I get around to getting up here and if I get some time, because I've been doing a lot of debating or discussing. We got geraniums and lily, all different kinds of things like petunias and begonias and all these different beautiful flowers all over the yard. It's just so beautiful. I can't even tell you how wonderful it makes me feel to see a garden. I don't know, but man, oh man, it's just so beautiful. Well, guys, I'm having a wonderful day. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And my friend Jacob on YakobyJacob channel is putting out some very, very little short videos that maybe in 1 minute or 30 seconds, he proposes to explain away the entire second coming. And I love you, brother, and I do want to get a time scheduled for me to have a discussion with you, a friendly discussion where we just talk about these things. And just to show you where I'm coming from, and I will show the audience where you're coming from here, I will play several clips of certain statements that you've made and explanations that you've made in the last several days. And then I will go ahead and briefly counter those, and then we'll do a better job when we meet in our interview if you're up to it. So here, Jacob, and forgive me, Jacob, I'm assuming your name is Jacob because your screen name, but let me know your name and more about what you believe and stuff. But what you said there is that the waters represent multitudes of people. And that's true. Sometimes the waters can be representative of chaotic stuff where, remember Peter sinking in the water. In that case, Peter wasn't sinking in a crowd of tumultuous people. So it doesn't always mean that. In that case, the waters meant the emotional fluidity rather than the air, which is usually the spiritual part, the mind. And the waters are usually emotional trauma. This goes along with what I was telling the professor, that I believe in multiple layers of interpretation, both esoteric, physical, literal, figurative, and all the others. Because if you just go and find all the places in the Bible where water, and I think it's only like 1 or 2 times that John in the book of Revelation says that these waters mean peoples and nations and tribes and tongues. So in that case, he's talking about a literal or a figurative meaning, that the water was figurative of that. However, in the esoteric layer, we see with the Apostle Peter sinking into the water that it's not peoples and nations and tongues, but it is the emotional trauma and fears of the lower thought patterns. And we sink down in that fear. And what's in the fear? In the water? Usually a beast. So you're right on with some of your esoteric understandings. However, when you say that the beast of Revelation just means stuff that was happening in 70, and the lamb that looked like a dragon, or looked like a lamb, spoke like a dragon, was the Pharisees or something. I think you said it was the religious zealots or the temple priests or something that were trying to demand people conform to what they were saying. Part of that is correct because the lamb is Israel on the land, that came up out of the land. and it's a false prophet. That's something that we're dealing with today, this false prophet that looks like they're Christians and they look like they're Jews, but they're not. And they're really speaking like the dragon, which is the devil. Okay, yeah, I kind of agree with you that that's the religious zealots and the false prophets. But then you talk about the beast, and you say it had to have been in 70 because that beast happened, this ferociousness of the zealots that were destroying people and murdering people and demanding that they worship the system. There's only one problem, my brother. The Bible clearly, probably as much as any other symbol in the Bible that's explained by the Bible, this is probably one of the chief. We have so many verses in the Bible that explains the beast from Daniel to Revelation that there's no mistaking it. It's certainly not the religious zealots, nor is it Rome. Maybe you think it was Nero or it was Vespasian or so forth. Here's the reason why that cannot be possible. Daniel says, I saw this beast, and they both describe it, Daniel and Revelation. Daniel and Revelation say that it looked like a leopard, which Daniel specifically says was Greece, and like a lion, which Daniel interprets as Babylon. It had the aspect of a bear, which Daniel interprets as Media Persia. And then it talks about this ferocious and wild beast that comes up after, from which comes a little horn and 10 other horns. And that was to be in the time of the end. But not just one little period in 70. It was supposed to have come up, according to John, after, in the future, from John. And we'll talk about whether John was in 68 writing that or 100. And I know that you think that the book of John was written before the destruction of Jerusalem. But either way, John, from whether it was 68 or 100, John says that the latter days is something we're going to have to watch and wait, and it will be the last final part of the days of the end. So there's different parts of the times of the end. And I'm going to share with you here in a minute what it means that the time is near and some things like that that will help you understand this. But we know beyond a doubt that the beast is all the governments from the days of Babylon, or the lion, all the way down to the very last 10 horns on the wild, ferocious beast, with a little horn that comes up in amongst them and uproots 3 of the first. Now, that is a very specific thing. It has nothing or no correlation with 70 and the religious zealots, because at that time there was only Rome and Jerusalem. Where's Greece involved in this? Where is Babylon involved in this? And you say, well, those are all parts of the beast that were prior. And here he's just talking about this particular moment when these religious leaders or zealots or Rome or whatever you interpret the beast at 70 to be. The problem is that this beast that we know of as Rome continues down until the final part of the end times, where he has 2 legs of iron. But then in the last final days after Rome, there will be 10 horns that shall arise in the time of the end. And that is our day, the one world government, regardless of whether you think it's NATO or the UN or some other future thing. It is an event that happens at the very final end of time. And it will come out of the Roman situation, because it will be partly of Rome, iron, and partly of clay, and it will not stick together, and the whole thing will come crashing down when Jesus comes. Well, if it happened in 70 and Jesus came, then why didn't it all collapse? Because it says, if you read it carefully, you can't just pass over these things and say, oh, it's this, it's that. The Bible tells you what it is. It's government from Babylon all the way down to the last days in the one world government in the Antichrist, in the final part of the end. So we can go into that much deeper later, but briefly, that's what it's saying. And if you're looking at it as a composite beast that has its roots, I mean, it's government itself, starting with Babylon, the head of gold that Daniel sees, and the angel says, okay, you head of gold. I'm going to put 7 times on you. You're like a tree, and you're like a statue that's got the head of gold and the breast of silver and the loins of copper and the legs which are long and divide. 2 legs of iron. Every scholar that's ever lived has said that's Rome. Rome's the only kingdom that split into 2, with the Byzantine, the Western, the Eastern, and came all the way down. And then if that's what the 2 legs are, then the 10 toes, or on the other parable with the beast, the 10 horns, which are parallel symbolic representations of these last days 10 horns, which is completely different and after the Roman Empire. And then the reason it shows it as a composite beast is because it wasn't just the religious leaders in 70, nor was it even just Nebuchadnezzar in 600 BC. It was the entire composite beast system. It's Satan. The dragon is Satan, and the beast is mirroring Satan's, who is the liar? Yahweh. Satan, the dragon. And the beast is mirroring it in the water and the emotions and the governments of the world coming up out of the peoples and tribes and tongues. They make a beast, a system, a government. And that's what it means. If you've watched my videos, you may have seen, and if not, I'll point it out here. But we also have Hosea chapter 13, which describes the same beast, lion, bear, leopard, and ferocious wild. And Yahweh says he himself is that beast. Well, how could that be? Because it's the law of Moses with the mark of the beast on your hand to your forehead. It's law and order. And there he specifically says that it's one blow after the other until the final blow. So it starts off with a lion, and then it goes to this leopard, and then it goes to this bear, and then it goes to the wild, ferocious beast. In every one of these places, whether Hosea, Daniel, or Revelation, and we can follow it and track it. It's not the religious leaders in 70. And then well after the days of the apostles and John, regardless of when they wrote their gospels or epistles, there would come the latter and final part of the days where well after Rome divides into the Byzantine and the East-West, division, it becomes partly of iron and partly of clay. And that's when Christ comes in the latter part of the end of time. And like the stone that the builders rejected, it slams down onto this big image, idol that they're worshiping, government, and it's all demolished and destroyed. And there's no more kings trying to usurp the Lord's authority ever again, my friend, until the time of the end. So what's going on today with all these horns trying to make a one world government, all these kingdoms? What's going on there over there right now? Isn't that what Daniel speaks of? O Daniel, go thy way until the time of the end, and you will stand up to receive your reward, your lot in the final part of the days, you see. And when you catch sight of this, you can count them. The angel swears by his left hand and his right that it shall be for a time, times and a half a time. And then shall the end come. And happy and holy is he that remains and arrives at the 1,330 and 5 days. And then that fits with Jesus and John and all the apostles who said, yea, at the end of those days, when the tribulation's over, the stars of heaven shall fall, and the moon won't give its light, and Christ will come on the clouds of heaven with his chariots and the saints, and they will gather his elect from the 4 winds of heaven, and he will come and defeat a blow to this wicked world and take all these kings that in their pride think they're going to rule the world, and he's going to battle with them. When did Jesus battle with all nations and when? He won a spiritual battle, yes, when he was on the cross, not in 70. Jesus wasn't on the earth in 70. The battle with Jesus is him on a horse, a white horse, with a sword out of his mouth. That didn't happen at the resurrection. That was his second coming that we're still waiting for, when Christ Jesus is going to fulfill the last part of Isaiah 61 verse 2, which is, he comes to make vengeance on those that are destroying the world, which it repeats again in the book of Revelation. And at that point, the beast is thrown into the bottomless pit. Well, the religious leaders and the Pharisees of that day in 70, if they thought of themselves as Jews, they couldn't have been any part of this beastly system. If they were the Romans, they were part of that beastly system. But there was not yet the 2 iron legs and the 10 toes that we will see arise in the final part of the day that we're all waiting for in expectation, with our lamps shining and our wicks trimmed and oil in the lamp, and waiting patiently and watching. And when we catch sight of that abomination spoken of by Daniel the prophet, let the reader use discernment. Then get out of Babylon, John says. Now this is how the Bible works. Jesus explains that Jerusalem, all the prophets that ever was martyred in Jerusalem. He sent them all the prophets, they killed them all. And all their blood is upon their hands. And then Revelation chapter 18 says that's Babylon, where all the blood of all the martyrs were. So yes, your intuition that this lamb dragon in the latter days is going to be Israel, or a false prophet, or religious leaders trying to deceive the world and get them to keep the law of Moses and get a mark upon their hand or their forehead, you're right. But it's not until after Christ left the world and returns again. Remember the parable. He goes like a king in the parable. He goes to a far country, and then he's going to come back on a long journey and return and set matters straight with his stewards. This is what the word parousia in the Greek actually means. His presence, or they shouldn't translate it that way. Like I know some people think it just means presence, but it literally means a king coming to make a visitation and set matters straight, collect their taxes, clean the streets, take account of everybody's actions and doings and whether they're serving his interests and feeding the hungry and doing all the things that he asks of them. And if not, he's going to rid the world of these unfaithful stewards. That has never happened. If you think Jesus came in 70 to rid the world of the religious zealots and the Pharisees and religious leaders of that time, or Rome, whichever you think it might be, I'm not quite sure from what you said, well, then why would he not finish what he said he was going to do and establish his kingdom? And no more tears, no more pain, and death be no more. That cannot be hyperbole, my friend. So what you're saying just is insufficient and lacks the depth of understanding that one needs if one is going to be a scholar. Brother, I love you, but that's just the truth. Let's continue on.
It's internal corruption teaming up with outside rebellion. The temple leaders and zealot mobs begin persecuting, demanding worship, and ultimately they self-destructed leading up to the Roman-Jewish war. The mark of the beast was the enforced loyalty to the zealot temple system. The right hand is action and deeds. The forehead is mind and allegiance. And this is parodied by the Teflon, the Torah boxes that they would put on their arm or their forehead, and this was a sign of loyalty to the covenant. Refusal meant persecution, but taking it meant spiritual doom and ultimately physical doom and the destruction. Christ is not returning because he promised he would return in the lifetime of the apostles and usher in a kingdom that you could not see if you looked out here or there trying to find it. A question I get asked a lot by end-time Christians that believe in a future coming of Christ: what about Revelation 21:4, where we see no more death and no more tears? In Revelation 21, the author is picking up off of Isaiah 65, where we see the former things passing away, a new heaven and earth, no more death, and no more weeping. If we keep reading in Isaiah 65, we'll find that the author isn't telling us that the end of physical death is coming, but spiritual. The tears, the spiritual death, the mourning that we read about, these are all curses from the old covenant law.
Exactly. And cursed is everyone who is hung upon a tree or a cross. So the curses of the law is death. It brings sin and death. The law is a curse and a bondage. And so it does literally mean death will be no more. So if the curse is removed, as you say, then death will be removed. Because the only reason for death is the law, which is that defilement in the sanctuary of your heart. This accusation, guilt, it's removed, and there will be no more death. Just like Adam was created in Genesis 1:26, Adam and Eve. Well, they were one, Adim, plural, and they never died until the curse came in Genesis 2. So if the curse is gone, then death is gone, my friend. Now let us look at that verse you spoke of in Isaiah chapter 65. Isaiah 65 and 17 is the verse that you spoke of. It says, "For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come into mind." Why can't you just accept the plain meaning of the verse? A new heavens and a new earth. "But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem, a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people. And the voice of weeping shall no more be heard in her, nor the voice of crying." Okay? So you're saying in 70 AD, Jerusalem became a joy to all the earth, and there were no more people there in that land, and the Jewish people no more cry, and the Jewish people are not under any more curse, which is the curse of death. 20, "There shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed." I believe that this verse is mistranslated. And to show you what I mean, forgive me for using AI, and for those of you who say, "Oh, Dave, don't use AI because it's wrong and you're bad." Sorry, guys, this is what we're doing. We're trying to find the closest answers, the best answers we can, and we're going to use the calculator sometimes, and I'm going to use the concordance because I'm only a human being and I need to use AI to run things and ideas by them to see if my intuition's correct. And for those of you who think I shouldn't be debating these guys because they disagree with me and you don't like it, I'm sorry. I'm going to continue to preach the gospel even to those who may disagree, because those are the very people that I want to convince, because they're the influencers. And if I can show them and we can come to understand this, and I believe that my brother here, Jacob, is sincere, and if I can show him, then we can work together to preach the gospel. So look, if you don't want to watch, don't, but this is a very important work we're doing right here. But this is what I asked AI, and you'll see how that verse, I think, should be translated. So I said, so could it be, as I said, it's repeating what it said. No more death by saying, no more shall a child or an old man not fulfill his days. And then, not but, the child will die at 100 years old. If there's no death, a child should not die at 100, nor a sinner die at 100. So is it possible it's saying the same thing twice? Not two contradictory things, but no more will a child or an old man die, or will a child die at 100, like now, or a sinner be cursed. No more curses. There can't be any more curses, Jacob, because you said that the curse will be removed. Not the death, you said, but the curse will. Even though we've already proven that death is because of the curse. So they say your perspective is a valid way to look at the Hebrew poetic structure, where a writer says the same thing twice using different words to reinforce the point, a technique called parallelism. While the standard translations suggest death still exists in this new world, your reading suggests Isaiah might be listing old curses that will no longer happen. Analyzing your not/or theory, in Hebrew, the second half of the verse begins with the word ki, which usually translated as for or because. In certain contexts, it can act as an emphatic marker or a conjunction that carries the no more from the beginning of the sentence. Standard view, there will be no more infant death, For even a youth will die at 100. Death exists, but is rare and delayed. Your view, there will be no more infant death, nor will there any longer die at 100, nor will a sinner any longer be cursed. Total elimination of these tragic events. The reason you're reading fits the context. Scholars and translators often debate this because it resolves the paradox of having death in a new earth. Parallelism. Hebrew poetry often repeats an idea. If the first part says no more death for infants, it makes sense for the second part to say no more death for 100-year-olds who are effectively infants in an eternal state. Missing the mark. Chot. As you noted, the word for sinner, chot, literally means to miss the mark. Your reading could imply that no one will miss the mark of reaching their full days anymore. Comparison with Revelation 21:4 famously says there is no more death. If your reading in Isaiah is correct, it removes the apparent contradiction between the two books. And they shall build houses and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. Well, that's exactly what's going on over there right now. Some are planting and others coming and stealing what they've got, and they're warring and fighting, and there is no joy, and there is certainly a lot of death going on over there. And mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. Really? Are the elect enjoying the work of their hands anywhere in the world, let alone Israel at this time? Or in 70? All the people that were in Jerusalem in 70, the whole city was mostly burned down. And the people were scattered all over the place and persecuted and murdered. People were eating their babies. Nothing good came out of that. They did not, they were free from the law. No, they weren't. The law of government, these Judeans continue to try to take over the world and destroy the world and control the world. They'd never stopped. And now they finally come up out of the bottomless pit sufficiently to try and make a one world government. So then it says, for as the days of a tree are the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. Well, how long does a tree live? Thousands of years. Now, perhaps, and I've heard that there are a lot of trees that live about 1,000 years. Is it possible, and I've shown this in other videos, that the immortal ones, or the deities, are really the people before the flood who all lived 1,000 years? That would make sense why it says in Psalms chapter 90, verse 4, that a day unto the Lord is like 1,000 years. Well, in other words, what we see in the Bible in Genesis before the flood, where people were living about 1,000 years, that's the day of Atum, or, the first person on the king list in the Sumerian tablets and the Egyptian tablets. And, Adapa, or Atum in Egypt. For Adam, the Lord, the immortal one, the Ancient of Days, lived 1,000 years. And so perhaps immortality doesn't mean that we don't, leave the body and go on to another body, but that we have this longevity. And when we leave, we don't not fulfill our days on this plan. Maybe we graduate still, have to graduate to another level. And perhaps this immortality is a body that doesn't die or decay, but we just simply no more die as a sinner. We don't have the curse, but we just transfer to the next star or graduating state, because each star differs from star in glory, you see. So it's eternal progression. Now, I kind of think that's probably likely what the Bible is saying, that when we die no more, it doesn't mean that our physical bodies, we don't put them off and advance from one glory to the other, eternal progression. It just means that our minds are not in the curse, and we don't die and decay and get sick. We just are transferred from glory unto glory, even as it's done by the Lord, as it says in 2 Corinthians 3:18. It says, they shall not labor in vain, his people, nor bring forth for trouble. They are the seed of the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them. And it shall come to pass that before they can call, I will answer. And while they are yet speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like the bullock, and dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, saith the Lord. If you think that happened, even spiritually, forget physically. If you think that spiritually, that the nature of the wolf was lying down with the lamb, and the lion nature became docile in 70 AD, then my brother, you are blind. And I hesitate to say this, but if you cannot see this, you're being blinded by some motive that I do not yet know. Because nobody in their right mind would spend their life trying to prove this when it is certainly unprovable and farcical what you're saying. The only thing I can think of is that you're a young man, you haven't really read the Bible for years independently of all the propaganda. And maybe in these latter days with the tiki-taki is the way it is, you've just been hearing all these little clips and you're going with it and you don't realize none of this is biblical exegesis of the scriptures or the proper way to put these verses together. And the interpretations that you're coming up with just doesn't fit, my brother.
In 70 AD, in the first century, we see the second temple destroyed. There's no more sacrifices, the veil's been lifted, and the barrier is broken. Christ's message is fully delivered. There's nothing separating you from God. There's no priest, there's no institution, no circumcision that now can separate you, because it's on your heart. It always has been.
And Jacob, while I understand your point there, and I agree with that, and I talk about that a lot in my videos, that when Christ died on the cross, it was finished. Spiritually, we were now sitting with Christ in heavenly places. And we now have authority, all of us, over scorpions and serpents. And this is why the Lord said, when he goes away, before he comes back again to take an account, he gives us all talents and tells us to be faithful. So we're his stewards that reign with Christ for 1,000 years. That's what happened when Christ was on the earth, when he was died and resurrected, from then until his eternal kingdom that it speaks of in Revelation chapter 5, where he reigns forever and ever, because it's an eternal kingdom where there will be no more death and no more sorrow or outcrying. And yes, we have already said that no more death means that we don't decay, but we just transfer from glory unto glory. So even though it is finished, Satan was conquered. Jesus said, "Fear not, little flock. I've conquered the world. You can do it too. You're going to gain victory." So now we go out, take up our cross, and follow him. So there was something that happened at the cross where we have 1,000-year reign with Christ. We're stewards, whether faithful or unfaithful, and we do our thing. Then he comes back to inspect his kingdom, which is already established when he died and rose again. He comes back to inspect his kingdom. We've been in his kingdom. We weren't under Judaism. The problem is a lot of individuals, this beast in the bottomless pit, it comes back out and people are deceived by the devil that was thrown down at the last days, who tries to deceive them and bring this whole thing back up out of the bottomless pit. But yes, we have to, in our own individual lives, defeat this devil. And we will have a specific period of time, this 1,000-year reign of Christ, and then a short little season, and then his eternal kingdom, where it's the final judgment. And then he comes and rewards the wicked and the righteous and separates the sheep from the goats at the end of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And then this little season, the great tribulation, Gog of Magog is going to gather the armies to fight Christ, and the dragon or the beast comes up out of the bottomless pit that was in the pit for 1,000 years, but then is released again at the end of the 1,000 years. So this all fits perfectly and harmoniously. But in no way could you say that in 70 AD that there would be any way to reconcile that with what happened, because there's no more joy. My people aren't like a tree. They don't live 1,000 years. They're not blessed. There are people that are still under that curse and that have died. and haven't yet received the love of the truth, that they might be saved or delivered from the wrath that is coming. I hope you understand what I'm saying, and I'll go into another video and explain that deeper with you if you'd like in a coming video.
I usually don't respond to comments, but this one was on my last video, and a lot of end-time Christians think like this gentleman does, so it's a perfect one for us to talk about. The comment is too long to fully show on TikTok, but ultimately the gentleman's talking about Luke 17:20 through 21, when Christ is talking to the Pharisees, and he's telling them that the kingdom that is coming you won't be able to see if you look out here or there to try and find it. The Pharisees are asking when the kingdom will arrive, and they think it's going to be thunderous, dramatic, and very visible for everyone to see physically. Christ is flipping the tables on them in this passage, saying, no, you got this all wrong. If you look out here or there trying to find it, you won't be able to, because it's in your midst. It's within.
Now, here, I'm only going to give a short answer to this, and I don't think it's going to be sufficient for explaining this to you, because you're going to protest. And even though I sometimes think you may protest too much, said William Shakespeare in the play called Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 2, to the lady, methinks you protest too much. But let me just explain that when Jesus said the kingdom is within you, the word kingdom there in the Greek, the Koine Greek, is basilia, and that doesn't mean the kingdom. Go look it up carefully, because sometimes they give you the meanings that they've translated it in the past. But go down further and you'll find the real meaning of the word basilia, and look up basilia in the dictionary. You'll see it's the capital of a kingdom. It's not the kingdom, the land, the frontiers, the territories of the kingdom, but it is the king and the rulers and the capital or the legislature of the kingdom. So the rule or the source of the kingdom that is to come is within you. But the manifestation on earth as it is in heaven, thy will be done, is on earth the restoration of paradise worldwide, where the lamb shall lie down with the wolf and the lion will eat straw like the bull. I will go into that deeper if you need me to, and we can discuss that further in another video separately.
Let's talk about Satan's little season. Revelation 20 is the passage where we read about Satan's short season, or the little season. Revelation 23 is a great reference point to understand what the text is telling us. In the Greek, it uses mikron, chronon, which means a very short or brief time. Now let's make this connection to Revelation 17:10, where it talks about the last beast, the final king, and he'll rule for a short time, a little while. And in the Greek, it's oligon, and that's meaning a limited period or a short time. So both of these passages are describing the exact same short final period at the very, very end.
Exactly, Jacob. You're absolutely correct. This is a big problem, because people don't understand that there is the 1,000-year reign of Christ, where we reign with Christ as stewards, faithful or unfaithful, and then he comes again the second time to make an accounting for the visitation, the parousia, when the king comes. And that is then Revelation 20, after saying the saints rule for 1,000 years, then it's over. Then we see the devil coming up out of the bottomless pit, the dragon being let loose, and then the nations go crazy, and Gog of Magog, and they go and gather the kings to have the great last battle. This is the little season, the great tribulation, the beast coming up out of the bottomless pit. This is our day, just before Revelation chapter 21, where there is a new heavens and a new earth, and there shall be no more pain, nor crying, and death will be no more. No more curse. We'll just graduate, as did the Lord, from glory unto glory, as it says there in 2 Corinthians 3, verse 18.
But let's make some more connections with Matthew 19 and Matthew 20. Now let's go to Matthew 19:28, about the regeneration, the rebirth.
Yeah, the rebirth. Regeneration. Generation means birth, offspring, or genealogy of a people. Or in this context, or the other context, where that generation that won't pass is that generation or brood or that spawn of vipers. If you look at that word generation does not mean a lifespan, but gene, from the root genos, which is where we get the word gene or our genealogy. All these words are the same word. Generation doesn't mean lifespan. So this generation, or the generation or brood or spawn of vipers, is the same word that many other times they use for the genealogy. There were 14 generations, as the professor points out, from this point to this point, and 14 generations. In other words, birthings or lineal genealogies. And therefore, this genealogy or this race or this offspring or genia will not pass away. And there you go, right there today is that genia, that brood of vipers still trying to do their shenanigans. So I just want to commend you for understanding that that word means rebirth, or that generation means a birth or an offspring or a genealogy of people. Just wanted to throw that in there at that juncture. We'll talk about that in depth if you'd like.
And here we see Christ is going to sit on his throne with the apostles and judge the 12 tribes of Israel. Matthew 19:30 says, many who are first will be last, and the last first. That's why Matthew 20 verse 1 begins with the word for. Christ immediately goes into the parable of the workers to explain what he had just said. So now let's make this connection with the parable and the last hour. Okay, so workers are hired all throughout the day, even at the 11th hour. And the 11th hour workers only work 1 hour, a very short time. Sounds familiar? Yet they receive the full day's wages like everyone else. Jesus is showing that right before the reward, right before the regeneration, there will be that final short last hour. So now let's summarize it. Jesus is connecting the regeneration directly to the short last hour in Matthew 20. That short hour is exactly the quote-unquote little season of Revelation 23 and the beast's short time in Revelation 17:10, all of which was fulfilled in 70 AD when the temple was destroyed.
But Jacob, you just said it would happen in the regeneration. What do you think that means? To just be a bunch of Jews still trying to manipulate the world and destroy us? What? They're over there banging their head up against the Wailing Wall? The regeneration hasn't happened yet, Jacob. And the last hour that you just mentioned, the little season, is the hour of her judgment has come. So that's why the Bible says there in Revelation, fear deity and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has arrived. This is the last judgment, Jacob, where every man, woman, and child, both Jew and Gentile, right? Like the Apostle Paul says, that the entire world, Paul says, how else shall he judge the world? Not the Jews, but the whole world, and even those who pierced him. But there will be the great white throne judgment. All the nations shall be gathered to the judgment. And we all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ to receive those things, whether good or evil, that we did in the body. So I don't know how you can misunderstand that. But let's go on to hear what you have to say.
Let's talk about the dating for the book of Revelation. Let's first take a look at the writings of Tacitus and how scholarship dates that in relation to how they date the book of Revelation. So historians are confidently dating the writings of Tacitus, the Annals, using later manuscripts and internal clues. However, they're applying a much stricter standard to dating the book of Revelation by often dismissing the early external testimony as well as the very plausible first century context. Some of the internal evidence they use for dating Tacitus to the 2nd century is the mention of Trajan's reign, who was a Roman empire during the 2nd century. The earliest copies of the manuscripts we find from Tacitus are around the 11th century, and most scholars date it to around 115 AD. The internal evidence we would have for dating the book of Revelation would be the temple imagery as well as the persecution framework.
So you're saying that if the book of Revelation mentions the temple, it had to have been before the temple was destroyed. Well, that's a little like the professor quoting from Isaiah about Babylon being destroyed and says, oh, that happened 600 BC. It can't be talking about our day. But literally in the context of Isaiah chapter 13, about the fall of Babylon, it literally in the text tells you it's for the time of the end, when the great judgment comes. And the Lord comes and restores the entire world. So when you're looking at the book of Revelation, John is quoting from all the prophets, not just Isaiah. Jeremiah, he's quoting from Daniel, he's quoting from Genesis, the serpent, the original serpent. He's quoting everything there in the book of Revelation. That doesn't mean that when John quotes the serpent in the garden, that John had to have been writing before creation. It means that John is going over all the prophecies and showing you that they're all spiritual and to be fulfilled in the latter days.
The external evidence would be the Muratorian fragments as well as the Peshitta heading. Muratorian fragments dated around 170 to 190 AD state that John is the predecessor of Paul, and Paul's work is roughly written between 50 and 65 AD, placing John's writing right before 68 AD.
The person who wrote that Muratorian fragment that you spoke of had some kind of a theological agenda, and he was trying to show that the New Testament was a unified thing, that somehow John wrote to the 7 churches and so did Paul. And he had this theory. He didn't know for sure. He is not an eyewitness, but he had a theory that Paul was intentionally following the pattern set by John. But that was just his speculation. Most scholars say that was an error. It couldn't possibly be, because Irenaeus, who was literally living in the days of Polycarp, who was the disciple of John, and with this eyewitness account, because he was there with Polycarp, said that John lived until 100, until the time of Trajan, in about 100 AD. It seems like, Jacob, you are trying to prove something, you have an agenda, and you've scoured the internet and you found some clown who, as a modern scholar, is going to try and disprove the Bible and disprove that Jesus is coming again. And he's found some 3rd century, I don't know, not a church father, but just some guy with an agenda who made a statement. And yet you're going to reject the eyewitness account of Irenaeus, who knew Polycarp, and you're going to try and weave this together, stitch it together, like the professor says, and go against the traditional understanding that everyone knew for 1,000 years, that John was sent to the Isle of Patmos after the time of Trajan in around 100 AD. So you've been reduced to this kind of manipulation to manufacture some doubt in people's minds, but you don't have any evidence or real proof. And this is all you got to disprove that Jesus is coming again. Brother, think about what you're doing. You're scouring the internet. You're scouring the history, trying to find some piece of evidence that Jesus isn't coming again. And that's all you got.
The Peshitta Syriac, which is dated around the 5th century, also states that the book of Revelation was written during the reign of Nero.
Brother, I don't know if you know it or not, but what you just said was false. And I hope you didn't just purposely lie to your audience. The Peshitta was written around 400 AD. 200 years later, they wrote a different version of it, the Syriac version, which that's 200 years later. They added the book of Revelation. It was not in the earliest Peshitta. They didn't have the book of Revelation. It wasn't there. So in 616 AD, they wrote this Syriac version, which then they put in the book of Revelation and added this interpolation. All scholars say that that is an interpolation. It is not part of the original Peshitta. So that is just hearsay, and that is, well, some kind of shenanigans. And you need to really study this information and not try to manufacture this kind of nonsense to try and get people to believe that Jesus Christ is not coming again, my brother.
This is where futurist Christians who believe in a second coming and secular scholarship come together. They want the book of Revelation dated post 70 AD.
Well, that's kind of ridiculous, because for all this time, like 2,000 years, everybody thought that John wrote the Revelation 100 AD. And so it's only been in modern times, because those people believed that Jesus was coming again. It's only in modern times where people coming up with this crazy conspiracies on TikTok that are trying to go back and reconstruct Christianity, and they're trying to find clues and some way to pick it all apart. You're the one who wants the book of Revelation to be written before the destruction of Jerusalem. Nobody in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries wanted this scenario because people in those days were looking for his second coming. It's people today who are not looking for his second coming. Per what Jesus said, that in the latter days people will say, where is his coming? And it's those people who want the book of Revelation to be written pre 70 AD so that they can come up with some cockamamie story that Jesus isn't coming. And by the way, if Jesus said that there was coming a day in the latter days where people would be saying, where is his promise coming? They start doubting that he's coming. You think that he was talking about a group of individuals maybe 30 years after he died on that cross? That he was talking about a group of Christians in that day that said, where is his coming? For since our forefathers fell asleep in death, all things continue as they have since creation. Well, why would they say that then? Because if they were looking for a generation, they could have stretched it out to at least 40 years or even 70. They would have had no reason to say, oh, it isn't coming, right? They would have at least waited until after 70 to say, oh, it's not coming. So it makes no sense for Jesus to say that this generation will not pass away, and he means a lifespan. And then only 20, 30 years later, these people are like, it's not coming, the generation's passed. What? You wouldn't wait 20, 30 years and say, it's not coming. No, what Jesus was saying is there would come a day when people would be saying, wow, it's been like 2,000 years and Jesus isn't coming. That's what Jesus meant. Look at the context, brother. But, I think we've probably done enough for today. And I still never even got around to explaining what the time is at hand means. It's an idiom that you'll be surprised to learn the meaning of. And yeah, they use that term all the way back hundreds of years BC about events that wouldn't actually happen for, if you believe at 70, right, then that would have been 600 years. So obviously when a prophet hundreds of years before Christ or 70 AD used the term that the world's going to come to an end, the time is at hand, didn't mean that it would come within a few years. But that term meant something else. And I'll discuss that with you. If you like, we can set up a time and I can come on your show and we can discuss that or any other subject concerning this that you'd like. And don't get me wrong, Jacob, I like you a lot. I think you're a great person. And I think you're smart. I think you're brilliant. And that's why I'd like to, you and I, sit down and get to the bottom of this so that we can both be on the same page, working in unity as teachers of the real truth so that we can prepare the world for what is coming. And I still don't really know exactly. Maybe you can explain to me what you believe is going to happen now, since Christ you believe has already come. And maybe if we get together and back and forth and share with each other these beautiful, amazing facts, we can come to a conclusion, the two of us together. And if both of us are preaching the gospel, and if we could get Josh and Jess, just imagine, let's say that one of us, Jacob, was to convince the other, then we would be preaching and teaching the world the same basic things. And that might help influence some others, such as Derek Jester or Joshua the Sons of God Ministries, or even the professor, and we could all get on the same page, and what force we would be to change the world and prepare us for the second coming. Or if, in case you're right, we would be able to warn the people of this great delusion that Jesus is coming when he's not. Either way, whatever is the truth, we want to get that out to the people. Anywho, I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate your efforts in trying to describe and explain your point of view. And I'm going to leave it here. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. You know, the Lord loves you. His grace and his peace will always be with you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.